December 1999, $500 million. A foreign private equity firm with no prior banking management experience acquires a controlling stake in Korea First Bank, a Korean commercial institution with 60 years of operating history. This is not a merger. It is not a partnership. It is a transfer of operational control. The first time in South Korean history that a foreign entity legally directed a domestic commercial bank. No economics textbook covers the regulatory sequence that made this transaction structurally necessary, politically executable, and systemically irreversible. This is that sequence. In 1996, the Korean banking system operated with a formal commitment to BIS capital adequacy ratios of 8%. In practice, most major Korean commercial banks were at or below that threshold. Korea First Bank reported a BIS ratio of 7.1%. Seoul Bank was functionally insolvent before the currency moved. The top 30 Chaebol conglomerates carried average debt-to-equity ratios exceeding 400%. These were not anomalies. They were the designed output of a 30-year credit allocation model in which state-directed banks funded export-oriented industrial groups at below-market rates, and regulatory forbearance substituted for balance sheet discipline. The system produced growth. It also produced a banking sector whose loan books were structurally indistinguishable from the leverage profiles of the industrial groups they financed. Between July and December of 1997, the Korean won collapsed from 844 per dollar to 1,962 per dollar. The depreciation did not cause the insolvency. It revealed it. 5 Korean merchant banks were suspended in December 1997. Korea First Bank and Seoul Bank were functionally non-operational as credit intermediaries. The International Monetary Fund assembled a $57 billion emergency facility, the largest in the fund's history at that point, with attached conditionality requiring financial sector restructuring. This was the external constraint. What happened inside that constraint was a domestic engineering decision. In January 1998, the Korean government established the Financial Supervisory Commission. The FSC was not a renamed version of a previous regulatory body. It was constructed with a specific legal power that no prior Korean financial regulator possessed: Prompt Corrective Action Authority. This mechanism was imported directly from the United States Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation Improvement Act of 1991. Under PCA rules, any bank falling below defined capital thresholds triggered mandatory supervisory intervention, not discretionary review, not political negotiation, mandatory action. The FSC could require recapitalization, impose operational restrictions, or initiate resolution without legislative approval for each individual case. The architects of this structure, drawn partly from the Korean Ministry of Finance and Economy and partly from advisory engagements with US and IMF technical teams, understood precisely what they were installing: a mechanism that removed the political override from bank supervision. The precondition for selling insolvent banks to anyone, domestic or foreign, was cleaning the balance sheets. The Korea Asset Management Corporation, established in 1997 and significantly empowered in 1998, purchased non-performing loans off Korean bank balance sheets at structured discount prices, eventually absorbing approximately 100 trillion won in distressed assets. This was not a bailout of bank management or shareholders. It was an asset transfer that made the underlying institution separable from its bad debt. Without Kamco's NPL purchases, Korea First Bank had no transaction value. After them, it had a price. The asset stripping was the prerequisite The sale was the mechanism. The legal engineering required one additional component. Until 1998, Korean banking law capped foreign ownership of any single domestic bank at 4%. The amendment to the Banking Act that removed this restriction was passed in the same legislative sequence that created the FSC's expanded authority. The 4% cap had existed for decades as a structural barrier to foreign control of credit allocation. Its removal was not announced as a strategic invitation to foreign capital. It was processed as a technical amendment in a reform package. The effect was categorical. It converted Korean banking licenses from protected domestic assets into internationally tradable control rights. Newbridge Capital entered negotiations for Korea First Bank in 1998. The final agreement closed in December 1999. $500 million for a 51% controlling stake. The governance terms were not incidental. Newbridge received operational control, board majority, management appointment authority, and explicit protections against government interference in credit decisions. The Korean government accepted these terms for a specific structural reason. No domestic buyer existed with the capital. The independence from Chaebol relationships, and the credibility to implement international operating standards. Foreign ownership was not the preferred outcome. It was the only available mechanism for breaking the institutional alignment between the bank and its legacy borrowers. The cascade that followed was not political. It was regulatory. Newbridge controlled Korea First Bank immediately implemented international credit scoring methodologies, loan loss provisioning standards drawn from Basel frameworks, and risk-weighted asset classifications that Korean banks had formally acknowledged but operationally ignored for decades. The FSC, now with PCA authority and a functioning reference model in the market, required domestic Korean banks to match these standards on a defined timeline. The competitive pressure was mechanical. Banks that did not adopt equivalent provisioning practices faced capital adequacy triggers under PCA rules. The foreign-owned bank became the compliance benchmark. This infrastructure, functional credit scoring, transparent provisioning, enforceable capital standards, was the precondition for the consumer credit expansion that Korean banks executed between 1999 and 2002. The credit card issuance boom that followed was not a separate policy. It was the downstream output of a banking system that had, for the first time, standardized tools for assessing retail credit risk. The same capital base restructuring that enabled foreign sale also enabled mass retail lending. These were not separate events. They were sequential outputs of the same engineering. 55 Chaebol subsidiaries were dissolved or merged between 1998 and 2000. The mechanism was not government decree alone. It was the removal of institutional banking relationships. When the banks that had financed these subsidiaries at concessional rates were under FSC supervision with PCA triggers and, in the case of Korea First Bank, under foreign operational control, the credit subsidy disappeared. Daewoo Group, carrying approximately $80 billion in consolidated debt by 1999, lost access to the relationship banking architecture that had sustained its expansion. The group's dissolution in August 1999 was the structural consequence of a credit infrastructure that no longer recognized political relationships as collateral. The costs were embedded in the mechanism and distributed unevenly. 160,000 financial sector workers lost employment within 18 months of the restructuring. Domestic shareholders of nationalized and restructured banks received no recovery on equity. Small and mid-market trade creditors received restructured settlements at significant discounts to face value. The Korean government recapitalized the banking sector using public funds, ultimately exceeding 168 trillion won in total resolution costs. These figures are the price side of the same transaction ledger that records the output. They do not require framing as injustice or necessity. They are what the mechanism cost, and they were not distributed to those who designed the mechanism. The architecture built in 1998 and 1999 did not remain static. Newbridge Capital sold Korea Exchange Bank to Lone Star Funds in 2003. Lone Star's eventual exit, completed after years of legal and regulatory dispute, demonstrated that the foreign ownership phase was always transitional. The banks returned to domestic control. The 5 dominant banking groups that now define Korean commercial finance are the consolidated output of the restructuring. The stress test came in 2008 when Korean banks faced a dollar liquidity crunch structurally identical to 1997 in its mechanism, if not its scale, resolved through Federal Reserve swap lines rather than IMF facilities. In 2011, the savings bank sector collapse revealed that the 1998 engineering had been applied to commercial banks and left the non-bank sector with its original architecture intact. The durable parts of the system were the parts that received the full FSC PCA foreign sale sequence. The fragile parts were the parts that did not. What the South Korean case proves is singular and structural. A government can use foreign capital as a regulatory bypass mechanism, importing governance standards that domestic political constraints prevent, only under 2 simultaneous conditions: an external crisis severe enough to remove the political cost of ownership transfer, and a pre-existing legal reform capacity sophisticated enough to construct the transaction architecture faster than the political opposition can organize. Korea had both in 1998. No comparable economy has replicated the sequence at the same speed. That is not coincidence. It is a description of how rarely both conditions exist at the same time.